Back in the day, before streaming, before CDs, we listened to music on albums. A vinyl disc spinning 33 and a third revolutions per minute brought us great music one side at a time. 20 or so minutes of music, 4 or 5 songs usually, that created a single listening experience. This format exposed us to other songs of the artist, not just the hits, and often flowed in an order that was created to build and maintain or mold a musical experience for the listener.
Sideshow brings musical experiences from the past to life today. Here, we discuss and review individual sides of record albums we have grown to appreciate and hope you will too. Welcome to The Sideshow. Welcome to The Sideshow. Mark is going to be taking the side for this episode. Mark, why don't you tell our listeners what we're going to be talking about?
Thanks, Mike. Today, we are going to be talking about an album from The Police. It's their second album, Regatta de Blanc, and we are going to talk about side one of Regatta de Blanc.
Good one.
And
good one.
This is a very early album that I purchased. I've been to a lot of work events where they ask you what your first album that you ever purchased was, and unfortunately, the first album that I ever purchased was by the Partridge Family when I was very young. So not really very cool. However, once we got into high school, and the notion of really having a job and working and going out and being able to hear a song on the radio. We had a what I consider to be a very good album-oriented rock station in Appleton, WAPL, played a lot of music. And one day I was listening to WAPL and they put on the song Walking on the Moon by The Police, which is from this particular album. And I listened to it just for one time, and the next day I went to Pipe Dreams, a place that we bought a lot of our records at, and purchased this album. And have had it ever since. I've always enjoyed it. And although Walking on the Moon is what drew me to the album, that was actually a song from side two. It was side one that I really spent more time listening to since that time, and actually up to this day. So that's what I felt that I'd want to share today. But before we actually get into the album side, just a little bit about the Police. They were a huge band for not that long a period of time. They came together in 1977. They were all from England. It was three members: Sting, who had a very notable solo career after he left the band. Their drummer, Stuart Copeland, and guitar player Andy Summers. And the three of them, so it's a three-person band, which is the first thing that's unique about them. A lot of sound for three people, especially a band that came together and really wanted to dive into into a punk style of music. You just didn't see a whole lot of three-person punk bands in a lot of cases, because of the volume and the amount of music that they wanted to put out in that kind of cluttered, hectic punk style. But they came together. It was actually Sting and Stuart Copeland, the drummer, who had met first. They were both in different bands, and they'd met. And Copeland was from London, and Sting ended up moving to London. And one of the first things he did when he moved to London was reach out and connect with Stuart Copeland. And they did some work. They had some people that they were doing business with and recording with, kind of moving around some shows and some songs that they did. And actually, they ended up connecting kind of later with Andy Summers, who was almost 10 years older than they were, and what would be considered more of a veteran of the music business than Sting or Stuart Copeland was. And the three of them who sat down and became the Police. Uh, Ultimately they ended up selling 75 million albums worldwide. They had a number of Grammys and other awards. Rolling Stone at one point dubbed them the biggest band in the world, and from really popular in both the UK and the US markets. They didn't immediately start out that way though. In fact, they recorded their first album, which was Outlandos de Amor, and they didn't even have a record contract or a manager at the time that they cut the album. And one of the songs, and I think it was Stuart Copeland's like older brother, who kind of went to work because he really liked the song Roxanne, which was on their first album, and leveraged that to get them a contract with A&M Records after they'd already cut the album. And that itself wasn't even immediate success. They had to release some of their singles and re-release them. They're moving from into this record management. They had a very grueling U.S. tour where they actually drove themselves around in a van across a pretty grueling tour for them before they really started to get traction with some of the music from this first album. And the album itself had a really noticeable reggae theme to it on a number of the songs, along with though a very focus on the punk rock scene that was going on at the time, and what really started to become this idea of new wave that they were looking at. Well, that was in 1978 when that album came out. Again, they had this pretty extensive tour, and they were then looking to produce another album. You get a record contract, they want more material. And in 1979, they came out with the second album, Regatta de Blanc, which had much more initial traction than their first album did. And just before we dive completely into that, a little more what happened afterwards. A third album followed very quickly. Again, the record company was pushing them to keep producing. That one was called Zenyatta Mondada, and also had a couple pretty large hits and really huge success much more rapidly. You could just sense commercially that they had now made the scene. Anything that they came out with was going to get some listen and some success. And they continued to put out a couple more albums, Ghost in the Machine, and then ultimately their final studio album, Synchronicity, in 1983. And then they ended up disbanding in 1984 when they were on the top at the peak of their career. Again, this was right around the time they were dubbed this biggest band in the world, and Sting went on to have some pretty significant success as a solo artist. They had a couple returns to tour again, which were all incredibly commercially successful. Again, based on the popularity of the band, but a really interesting and incredibly successful band that kind of had to work for it to get things going early on.
The and you kind of summed it up relatively well. I mean, the really 5 albums is what they
Mm-hmm.
had, and the Police sort of, they went from the late '70s into the early '80s and sort of defined that, because by the early '80s, MTV era.
Yeah.
I mean, Synchronicity was ubiquitous on MTV,
Mm-hmm.
which was very big at that time. And the first album kind of had that sort of reggae new
Yep.
wave sound. I think I think that you really have to consider. I think new wave is probably a better label than punk,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah. I'd agree. I'd agree. I'd agree.
um and Regatta de Blanc was really just kind of a more polished version of the Police sound. And I think that Regatta de Blanc is when the Police sound was formed.
Yes.
And they created this unique, very characteristic sound, uh, and and they were able to sustain it over the course of an entire album in Regatta de
Hmm.
Blanc, and to kind of basically keep that same style for Zenyatta Mendata.
Yes.
And by that point they were big. I mean, they
Yes.
kind of could call their own shots. And I read somewhere, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, that for Regatta de Blanc they kind of had to kind of fight off um, uh, like record company control, and they did that by keeping the budget low
Hmm.
for the recording sessions for Regatta de Blanc, so that since the studio or whoever was the record company wasn't that was going to be releasing the record, well, if we're giving you so much money, well, then we're going to want to have our own producer. We're going to want to
Hmm.
have some creative input into what you're doing here, and they specifically resisted that at the time of Regatta de Blanc. Comes in Yada Mendata, the record company that they'd sort of made their bones and were able to take advantage of a little bit more financial support from the record company, because the record company was going to give them more elbow room to do what they
Yes.
liked.
Well,
Um,
and I also think that part of that was they were in return for that control. They also played ball with the record companies when it came to their timelines. And I believe it was on their next albums in Yada Mandata, which is, as you pointed out, was huge. I mean, they were recording until like 4 o'clock in the morning before the day they were going to go on a global tour. They were willing to look. We'll put out the material. We'll go on the tours that you want. But that. So I think the record companies were happy with that, and obviously they were happy with the results too. They had no record control for their first album because they recorded it before they even had that, and they were getting the results with them working on the music. But one way or another, I 100% agree. They were able to keep a lot of control over what they wanted to do through these albums.
well, and after Zenyatta Mendata, I mean, Ghost in the Machine, it kind of it had a different sound.
Hmm.
I mean, it was they sort of moved beyond what I thought was a style that they could have kept going for their entire career. I mean, because
Hmm.
I that the Regatta de Blancs and Yada Mendata sound, I mean, that is the Police to me.
Yes.
And even though Synchronicity was their sort of big, Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen type massive hit, um, I thought that Zenyatta Mendata and Regatta de Blanc in particular were better albums actually,
Yes.
and were more distinctively Police in their sound. Um,
Yes. There. I think that uh, absolutely. If you're going to listen to, if you've only got time for a little bit of Police, you want to focus on these earlier albums. I
yeah.
think that's guidance that I'd give anybody. And I also agree with you what you said before about Regatta de Blanc is where they first established that Police sound. The very unique vocals from Sting, and an incredibly just kind of tight drumming from Stuart Copeland. A lot of rim, on the, and a sound to that drumming that was always there and always, and moving, pushing the music. Not he wasn't one of these drummers that had this huge drum kit. This wasn't like a Neil Peart type setup. He was pushing the music forward with a very kind of traditional drum kit in a very unique way, and a sound that was that you could pick out for the Police. So,
Well,
and pretty
all
collaborative group as well, with a mix of individual writing and then the entire group writing and contributing to some of the songs as well.
well, they all three members of the band made good use of their respective instruments,
Hmm.
and like the way you point out the little distinctive things that Copeland would throw in, and he did more than just laying down the beat in
Hmm.
his drumming, and Andy Summers, the guitarist, a lot of texture and color to his playing, but it was simple. It wasn't screechy, sustained guitar solo type stuff that he was doing,
Hmm.
but a lot of substance there, and Sting is a he just kind of did the same thing, figured out ways to use his instrument that would be more than just keeping the alternating bass line to fill the pocket with the drummer. They did more than that, and so interesting collection of guys, and they made a lot, like you say, they made a lot of sound for
Hmm.
three guys, and it
Well, let's take a look at the album. This we have here the album Regatta de Blanc, kind of the three on the on the cover. On the back, the songs and the three of them. And I want it noted for the record that this what has always been the hair that I wanted. Just to get that out there. When I was in high school, when I bought this album, my hair was completely unmanageable. I entered the service where I didn't have any of it to worry about, and then since that, well, nature has taken over. But if I can ever go back in time to my 20s, besides doing all the things I'm going to do about buying the right stocks and that type of thing, the first I'm going to do is find someone that can give me hair like this. Always enjoyed it, but kind of a cool look. The three of them, taking a bow or bowing down, and then that just very kind of new wave style to their dues that they're showing off, and then on the on just pretty basic sleeve itself with some art of the band. Um, and we will be talking about side one, the first side of the album. It starts with the song "Message in a Bottle," and this is again very, as we talked about. There's kind of a style that goes through all of this album and really became that Police style, and it really displays itself on this song. And I kind of describe it as a nervous energy that they have. It's always moving. It never drags. There's always an energy to it, but there is a kind of an edginess or a nervousness to it that you hear. And in the song "Message in a Bottle," which has got just a great, this whole notion of Stuart Copeland and his drum track. This really shows it in this particular song. From the very start, as the song opens, all the way through, you hear this kind of drum that we're talking about. A lot of rim of the things that is just a tapping and driving the song forward, along with what is kind of a light and higher pitched guitar sound, also moving very quickly, that you hear that goes along with. So, "Message in a Bottle" is it's a song about loneliness. It's about a person that's a castaway on a desert island, is just a castaway, an island lost at sea, another lonely day, no one here but me, is how sets it up, just alone on an island. And this person decides they're going to send an SOS to the world. And you hear this a lot, and they hope that someone gets their message in a bottle. So this castaway is throwing this message in a bottle out to sea. And as you go through the song, a year passes. Just he's still alone. He's by himself. Nothing. And then through a couple parts of the song. Again, you've got this driving music that is just keeps the song moving, quick moving, toe tapping type stuff. It's about this loneliness. He's still alone. He takes one little refrain in the lyrics to talk about how love can mend your life, but love can break your heart. It's almost like, yeah, I'm not gonna, yes, love could mend my life, but can also break my heart. So kind of casts that aside immediately, and then returns to this loneliness in his life. But one day he walks out, and he couldn't believe what he saw: 100 billion bottles washed upon the shore. So he finally got his answer, and there's clearly 100 billion other people that are also alone that have now sent him a bottle in return. And it's really about, yes, there's loneliness in life, but there's a lot of people that feel that way. So you don't need to be alone in your loneliness.
The well, and just lyrically, because I think it's about isolation, and
Hmm.
that as you say, the bottom line is that people are always going to be isolated from others to some extent.
Hmm.
And whether the island motif is a metaphor for just the fact that we live in these large cities, and people are, you're people around you all the time, and you never talk to them, you don't know who they are, you have no idea what's going on in their lives. And um uh uh so when you said earlier it's a song about loneliness, is basically, it's not rocket science what the
Yes.
song is about. But it's a and the you talked about the opening and the guitar. Andy Summers gets a lot of. I mean, his sound really permeates all of their songs, and this one is just, it's a good example of, there's a lot going on with what he's doing, and it's very well played. It's got a very unique feel and texture to it, but it's not overpowering. It's not, it's not jamming power chords. It's really good playing with a very unique sound to it that fits very well into the kind of the reggae new wave style that the Police had sort of developed for itself.
Hmm.
And it sounds like a hit on the radio.
Yes.
I mean, it really does. But it doesn't sound cheap or trite or thrown together. It's not something like, well, let's sit down and write a hit.
Hmm.
It doesn't sound like that.
Yeah.
But it sounds like a hit on the radio.
Yes.
And that kind of that lack of that it's not contrived. That kind of feel makes it a great song, great album opener.
The and an interesting part of that, you talk about Stuart Copeland. Later on in talking to him, he had said one of the things that he loves to do is to go watch cover bands play this song, because he said they overdubbed his drums about 6 times. You talk about a lot going on. Well, it wasn't all him in a single performance. They used some technology for this amazing drum performance, and he's always interested to see how these cover band drummers are going to make it all fit together. Right in the back, he always finds that an entertaining thing, and obviously a challenge that that he had when they were performing this live. But and Sting had said about the song, obviously it's about loneliness, but there is some solace that can be taken if you understand that it's can be a natural feeling isolated, and there's a lot of people going through it too.
Yeah, it's a great song.
So, and then we follow that with the song Regatta de Blanc, and there's been kind of a lot of back and forth about what regatta is the name of the album. Regatta de Blanc actually means that people is like it's white reggae, and then other people will point out, well, regatta really doesn't mean reggae, and in French that means like boat, or so. The bottom line is, in later interviews, it was like we were just trying to put some words together that sounded, had a sound to it. So the song "Regatta de Blanc" is actually considered, even though it does have some lyrics, it's very repetitive lyrics that are just almost like a native sounding,
More of a
Rio.
chant,
Yes, more
more
of
of
a
a
chant
chant.
that goes along, and it's actually been considered an instrumental by most. In fact, their first Grammy was for this song, and it was for an instrumental performance that they had. So it's a it's a unique, fast moving, very tight, start to the song, and then this kind of native chant. It keeps you moving along. It's got kind of a pleasant tune, but I really view it as although it's a good song, it really is just a very smooth bridge from Message in a Bottle onto the rest of the album.
The I read somewhere that the Regatta de Blanc, the song was taken from like an instrumental jam that they would do in live performance, that they just kind of came up with, and was part of their live show. And I don't know I think it's great playing. I mean,
Oh
it
yeah.
just it when I first heard that, I thought, oh, these guys just put a track on their album from when they were screwing around in the studio, just jamming.
Hmm.
Now, I think that they was a little more deliberate than that, probably, but it's that kind of song, and the way the chant comes around. I mean, first they're doing Rio Rio, then Rio Rie Rio, and then but that Rio Rie Rie yay yay yay
Yeah.
yeah, and then they blast into the closing part of the song where they're kind of rocking out,
Yes.
and it's just cool.
Yes.
And if you like the Police style that they had on this album and Zenyatta Mendata,
Hmm.
if like me you just like that style of music, it's like I could listen to like a 12-minute version of that kind of playing and
Yes.
get into it, and
Yes.
not everybody likes
Oh
that kind of thing, but they're good. This song showcases the fact that they were good players
yes.
in addition to good songwriters or just kind of recording songs. They could play. These guys could
And some
play.
and that playing style just created some absolute energy. And this song, to your point, is a great example of that. It goes through this entire side, but there's a lot of energy. It's the type of side that you would put on if it seemed like a party was dragging a little bit. It's like put this side on. It just there's energy to it, right? To the song, but it does, although the lyrics themselves aren't necessarily telling a story. Great song, great energy that really builds towards this end. And the next song that we move into is another very upbeat song. It's All Right for You is the name of the song, and it's it kind of goes through these lyrics again, very upbeat. It was written by the Stuart Copeland and Sting. So again, you've got that presence of the drum is a critical part of it. It's got kind of a punky feel to it, but it's also got, because of the way that it moves through its lyrics, which is really just a listing of kind of cliches about life and going through the business of life. Wake up, make up, bring it up, shake up, stand by, don't cry. I mean, it goes through this almost like something you'd hear on like "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel. Just kind of this
Yeah.
list of things with again with a lot of energy and this kind of tight, Sting, drum style tosses in. Then this is where kind of like, okay, what are we getting at here? Watching while the world dies. Okay, so it's you're going through this life, all these things that are happening, just moving through while potentially things outside of your own little life might not be going right, and then other things, big car, movie star, just continuing to move through these things, and then comes the chorus of it's all right for you, it's all right for you, not it's all right for me, it's all right for you. And that's, it's the song isn't "It's all right for me," it's all right for you. So kind of a play on all these people that are just going through their lives, and that might be fine for you, but there's a lot of other stuff that is going on, and we go through a pretty lengthy lengthy stage of this stuff. I mean, there's verse after verse: limp wrist, tight fist, contact, no twist, black dress, no mess. Just kind of moving through all these different parts. Goes very quickly from verse to verse, and we do get a guitar break after one of the choruses, but it keeps moving you through, and then back to this chorus of "It's all right for you." It's all right for you, that kind of brings you back to that notion. Cool song, very high energy, great drums going on with that, and just a very fast moving set of vocals that keeps the song moving.
The I think this is a great song because it's simple, it's straightforward. You've sort of covered basically what the lyrics touch upon, and I agree with you. It's a song about where the singer is telling the listener you know you're complacent, you're willing to accept the world as it is, and that's okay for you, but
Yeah.
let if you make the world what you want it to be by your own actions
Hmm.
seems to be what the lyrics are about. But the we I think the term new wave was used to describe the Police, and I think that's accurate on the one hand, but another label that I think with this song in particular, post punk, because new wave could be character. You could describe that a lot of ways depending on who you ask. And one of them is sort of like more accessible, more commercially friendly punk,
Hmm.
for new wave. But whereas post punk is more like a more artistic punk,
Hmm.
as a the commercially viable wasn't necessarily as strong of a consideration in what was labeled post punk. And so it's like a new wave band, you think of like the Cars as being a
Hmm.
potential new wave band, and others, like or like, Flock of Seagulls or something like that. Just a different
Hmm.
kind of thing. Whereas the Police, and I think the fact that they were guitar oriented is a big part of it. One of the bands that's really a kind of the quintessential post punk band is Joy Division, which
Hmm.
sort of was the original band before New Order came around and had some popularity, kind of synth pop type stuff. But Joy Division they had keyboards, but they were a guitar oriented band.
Hmm.
And I think that the Police are close, are kind of midway between those two poles. They're both post punk and new wave, and this song leans on the post punk side of things because there's sort of an accusatory quality to the
Hmm.
lyrics, not in your face, but a little bit of a you're not, it's all right for you.
Yeah.
Well, knock yourself out,
And
and the guitar break just before you chime in, the
yeah.
guitar break, it's aggressive. It's aggressive sounding guitar. I mean, it
Yeah.
has that sort of amplified pace to the song. That's one of the things that punk and new wave brought about
Hmm.
in radio music. But you were going to say,
Well, and just there's I, I agree with you. You have this kind of sequence or evolution of music, which we see in a lot of different styles, and in some cases, you've got people that just wanted to go into a different direction, and in other cases, there's just a refining as people get a little bit clearer understanding when you talk about like punk music moving to new wave to post punk. You know, the at some point people want to make some money off this stuff, meaning it's got to be a little more accessible and a little bit more broader audience. And I think that you saw, when you look at, I think that new wave was a broader appeal than punk was, and post punk would be even a broader appeal than that. That again, when you start to get more and more bands that are out there, and some of that had to do when we talk about post punk bands is the big introduction of a lot of keyboards into popular music, and that not that people didn't still enjoy listening to guitar, but I mean the '80s, a lot of keyboards in the
well,
'80s that
uh,
that
I
that
think
that kind of went on.
synthesizer perhaps being the
Yes.
synthesized keyboards being a big part of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. But as that began to take, a bigger part of music, there's people that enjoyed, very, guitar, rock and roll that kind of felt a little bit out in the cold on where
No.
some of that music was going. And, there was some bands that were able to keep a very rock song sound doing that. But the Police, as we're talking about here, no keyboards here. We're talking, you got a drummer, a guitar, and a bass, and just putting out this kind of music. And I would agree with you that that guitar break was aggressive, and I do think that it was this. a mentality like a punk mentality, because they're they're pointing out, at least in the lyrics, that most other people are not are just living their daily lives, and because part of the song says it's all right for you and you and you and you and you and you. It's like everybody else is kind of wrapped up in their own lives and misery, and not kind of like seeing the bigger picture. And I'm kind of an individual here, or we're individuals that are just taking a different view of this. So which I think is a very punk kind of
Yeah.
attitude going on. But I mean, I think you saw similar progressions as you get into what people would have thought as grunge music early on. Let's fast forward a few years now, right? And what became more popular grunge music. It's like, well, these guys just got a little bit more refined, a little bit better at doing it, and became very popular and very mainstream, as opposed to what some of the roots of that kind of rock and roll really came from. So anyway, back to the Police, and back to them. We do move from there to another song that has got some aggressiveness too, and that's "Bring On the Night." And I really I like the way that this song it moves back and forth. It starts out with this very kind of again tight, neat, like a staccato type. Again, that drum, and even what we're hearing from the guitar and bass are very just it's tight. But dit is the way that it moves, but it changes right as we move from a chorus about how this afternoon has gently passed me by, the evening spreads its sail against the sky, which is the words and lyrics are soft, but the music itself is very tight, regimented type music. And then we switch into the chorus, which is "Bring on the Night, couldn't stand another hour of daylight," and it moves again to this more harp like kind of thing, back and forth from the chorus. We start with staccato, very unique stuff. We have these verses. You're almost hearing a much smoother harp like kind of sound to the music. And then when it brings it back to the chorus again, "Bring on the Night," it gets more regimented again, more hard. So the song goes back and forth between these two types of feels: a flowing type feel, like a harp, and this very regimented type staccato type feel. And I as I first listened to this song, way back in the day, it was really about, especially with youth, to me, is the idea of, look, we're all waiting for the night. The day is just boring. What are you doing? You're sitting in school, or you've got some, whatever. You're waiting for the night. That's when you're going to get together with your friends. And look, this notion was not alone. If you've heard "Night Moves" by Bob Seger, if you've heard, other songs that, much more recently, Kid Rock talking about sipping whiskey from the bottle, not thinking about tomorrow. This stuff all happens at night. And I first looked at this song as like, look, we're just bring on the night. That's where the fun is. That's what we're waiting for. The days are just wasted. But the more that I've listened to this song, it really feels a little bit different than that, because of the fact that these choruses are just so much more edgy there than the smooth flowing days. And you listen, he doesn't just say "bring on the night." It's he drags it out. "Bring on the night." It's really kind of a darker kind of sound. And so I kind of moved away from "the good things happen at night," and the more of a now the night is where I, I've been waiting for it. The interesting thing is, in kind of later readings, the song was actually written by Sting before the Police formed. It's when he was in his previous band, and he'd envisioned the song to be about Pontius Pilate, more of a dark character, and he actually switched his way of thinking after he read the book Executioner's Song, and then he began to think about the song being about Gary Gilmore And he said from that time on, when he sings that song, that's who he thinks of. So it's like, yeah, my notion of a bunch of kids having a good time at night, as opposed to, no, this is Gary Gilmore getting ready to head into the night to do some of his business. A little bit of a range of thoughts there. But to bring back again the way that the music changes from a smooth flowing piece of during the day, and then as he moves into Bring on the Night, the change into this very regimented staccato kind of feel is really what stands out the most in this song.
The well, lyrically, I agree with you that it is kind of a dark song. It's not a bring on the night so we can party. It's different. I mean, the singer, it's sort of like he wants to be stuck in between today and tomorrow.
Yes.
Because he talks about, I couldn't stand another hour of daylight, and then the future is a question mark. So there's uncertainty there. It's not like and he's the light is staring me blind.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, he's not looking for tomorrow. He's looking for tonight.
Yes.
And he wants to get rid of today. And this is one of the, I mean, it's good. You mentioned that Sting wrote this before he was a member of the band, because this is a Sting type song.
Yes.
And you look at his solo career, and this, this is the type of stuff that Sting had on his mind. And so lyrically, it's a very simple song, but that is the message that it eventually, after I listened to it long enough and had the wherewithal to really think about it, it's about someone who prefers to be stuck between today and tomorrow, and enjoy what enjoys the night, the dark better than the light, kind of thing.
Absolutely. And there definitely is the notion of, no, the day is bad. You talked about that. Couldn't stand another hour of daylight, and also the idea he says in here. God, bid this yesterday goodbye. He was not happy with the day. He was not happy with the yesterday. He wanted that bid goodbye. So and not really looking forward to tomorrow either. So I'd agree with you. It's being stuck between those times. Interesting song, but again, it's got a good rhythm. It's fast energy putting into it, and also some very aggressive guitar that's in there. There's this kind of dun 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 dun, that seems to pull at you as a guitar piece. So some aggressive guitar in there as well that keeps this song sounding edgy, and again kind of nervous.
Instrumentally, at the beginning of the song, you can hear what the sort of thing that would normally be played on the lower strings of the guitar, but I believe it's actually Sting playing it on the higher strings on the bass with a pick.
On the bass, yeah.
And it's the sort of thing that isn't often, or at least is not part of the what I consider the bass player filling the pocket of the drummer to keep the beat and just be sort of a conventional rhythm section. It's just more complex than that. A good example of the Police making the most use out of their individual instruments to put together a song that has a very unique kind of feel to it.
Absolutely.
A good song. There's a reason why, Sting as a solo artist put out a live album, which I think was called Bring on the Night.
Bring on the Night, yep.
Which I've got somewhere. I think
there was also a documentary about him that was called that as well. So very central, obviously, written before he joined the band, a part of this album, and then continued to he identified with it.
Yeah.
So we move from there to the final song on the side, which is called Death Wish, and this is I've heard and seen some things about this. The bottom line, you've got a guy that's cruising in his guitar, pushing his guitar. You've got a guy that is cruising in his car, and he is pushing it as hard as he can. He's heading into the night again, from following his headlights into the night. Uh, Never thought they'd see the day that he was playing with my life this way. Got to keep my foot right down. If I had wings, I'd leave the ground. He's pushing towards the edge is what he's doing. And whether driving in a car is a metaphor for the rock and roll lifestyle, whether it is, I've seen some people say that Sting was talking about his own, because of the heavy touring that they were doing, his own abuse of drugs at the time. I don't necessarily buy it. This wasn't a Sting song. This was the three of them together worked on the song. So probably more of a talking about the kind of the high risk lifestyle, rock and roll, fast paced, no time to rest lifestyle, pushing it, that they have. But he does talk about, and he makes the transition from pushing the edge to going over the edge, talking about how the day I take the bend too fast, looking, seeing that day was there, that they take the bend too fast, judgment that could be my last. I'll be wiped right off the slate. Don't wait up, 'cause I'll be late. So seeing that sooner or later, this is going to end badly. So again, another rim tapping, driven song. The guitar and the bass very quick moving, and just kind of leading into this song about somebody driving like a maniac into the night.
The and I think that in rock and roll, I mean, driving a car is a big metaphor for a lot of things. I mean, Chuck
Mm-hmm.
Berry, Maybelline, it was a
Yeah,
car,
yeah,
and a lot of Bruce Springsteen music is that driving. You just get
yeah,
out on the road and go,
yep,
and where are we going? We're out of here. And
yep.
so the idea of getting behind the wheel of a car and driving is a very rock and roll. It's metaphor for the release of
Mm-hmm.
moving away from something, moving towards something, doing something other, than what you're doing, to getting away
That's
from
right.
what you're doing, something
That's right.
new.
Anything but this.
Yeah, anywhere but here.
Yeah.
And as far as the death wish part of it, kind of live fast, die young, you know, too fast to live, too young to die, bye
Mm-hmm.
bye, or rock and rollers with one foot in their grave, stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically kind of summing up that message, and has uh, and musically it covers the same kind of territory that we've talked about already regarding some of the other songs. The way they put it together, there's nothing particularly unique in the context of this album, but just a good it, it's a good example of how they had really struck an instrumental equilibrium between the three of them that was just very effective, and took them through an entire other album, with the Zenyatta Mandana.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
uh,
and I've heard, or read criticism of this album in particular, that even though this is a great sound, and it was a new sound, and it was a very unique sound at the time, that there's quite a lot of it on this album. It is, it could be said that, that there is a lot of similarity, and we've talked about it, about how that Police sound is a big part of these. I don't completely agree with that criticism, though, because these songs are different songs, and there's a uniqueness to each of the songs. There's a uniqueness to what they're talking at and kind of driving at these songs. And although I think that a lot of people will listen to this side, and this final song, Death Wish, would not be what they'd see as the best. But I mean, this topic of not just getting in the car and driving, which I 100% agree with you. I mean, so many people look at that as just a fantastic metaphor of rock and roll itself. But, this song talks about actually going to that edge. And as I think about that, I cannot not think about Hunter S. Thompson writing in Hell's Angels about on his motorcycle at night driving down that coastal highway and pondering the edge and the notion that there's no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones that have gone over, and everybody else has somehow pulled themselves back, and in this song, definitely as you look towards the way that it ends, the song ends, it is the intention that they eventually will know where the edge is, because the song ends with them, yes, they have gone over, and there wasn't some other fear or somebody helping them or whatever that was able to pull them back from that. And I cannot listen to this song without thinking of the words of Hunter S. Thompson.
Well, and one of the lyrics in the song is, I got to keep my foot right down, which I figured his right foot, in other words, the
Yeah.
accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
And Hunter S. Thompson has used that analogy to describe, his own. People ask him if he had some sort of mystical, philosophical quest in mind when he was, using drugs and stuff like that. And he said, "No, I'm basically just pressing my accelerator and seeing how fast I can go." And so that's really a very apt comparison that you make with some of the things that Hunter S. Thompson has written. And as far as what you said about the sameness of the style on the album, that's true as far as it goes, but it's a good sameness in my
Mm-hmm.
in my humble opinion. And there's a CD I've got. I like, among many other types of music, I like blues music, and there's a CD by a blues guitarist named Freddie King. Very big influence on Eric Clapton. As far as blues guitarist goes, very well known. And it's called Just Pickin', and the entire CD is 24 tracks, all of them 2 or 3 minutes long, of just instrumental Freddie King, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of sameness.
Yep.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great. If you
Yeah.
like that stuff,
Yeah.
and I do, and I like the Police sound
Yes.
on Regatta de Blanc and Zenyatta Mendoza. I like it, and they could have, if they would have made 6 more albums after Zenyatta Mendoza that just maintained that style, I probably would have ended up liking all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because they're able to put enough variety in the songs on this album and on the next one, and so it's a worthwhile sameness, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And what they've ended up doing here is, again, a really great band. And this being one of, really kind of the first album that settled into this thing that made them great and so popular. And what came together as a great side from start to finish. 5 songs that work together very well to what was the kickoff of a sound that would carry them a really long way. The Police, Regatta de Blanc, side 1. Great side.
Definitely a great side.